They skipped my name like it didn't belong to anyone. Not to a daughter. Not to a legal proxy. Not even to a patient. It was just missing. Erased. And yet my pulse was racing. My breath short, my body still fighting. But no one called for me. The stretcher creaked as it turned down the hallway, my back slick with sweat against the vinyl. Fluorescent lights blinked above me like they, too, were tired of witnessing. A nurse brushed past, clipboard in hand, eyes forward, as if I were a misplaced coat someone else should have claimed. I opened my mouth to speak, but the registrar beat me to it. Next, no emergency contact listed. My name, not even a pause. Pressed the call button, no sound. Just the steady hum of machines and footsteps fading toward people who mattered more. The scent of antiseptic stung like betrayal in the air. There's a silence that happens before grief. The kind that doesn't scream, but tightens. That silence was lying next to me, invisible under my hospital blanket. If this story found you at midnight, let me know. I'm listening. Don't scroll past. Someone else needs to hear this too. A voice echoed from memory shop. Brittle. You are not my responsibility anymore. It was my daughter, 3 weeks ago, she'd said. It, with her arms crossed and her heart shut. I'd laughed then. I didn't find it funny now. Now, the words felt like broken glass in my chest. I reached up, weak but sure, and whispered into the dusty plastic of the intercom. Please, pick up. I gave them my mother's number, the only woman who never left me behind. The line was silent, a click, then nothing. I waited. I counted ceiling tiles, 32. 32 pieces of proof that I still existed. A draft stirred against my cheek from the air vent above, and something else stirred inside me. A realization, a spine. They could skip my name on a clipboard, but not on a will. Not on a power of attorney form. Not in the hospital records I legally controlled. They forgot I'm her executor. They forgot my mother gave me the pen and the power, and if they wanted to play with omission, I'd respond with documentation. The metal rail dug into my side, cold, familiar, but suddenly, it felt like a handle I could pull myself up with. I didn't cry, I didn't plead. I breathed slow, deliberate until the storm in my chest softened to a still sea. They wouldn't erase me. They couldn't. My fingers curled around the thin edge of the hospital blanket, not for comfort, for control. That fabric became a flag mine. I'll make them face me, I said aloud. Not to anyone in particular. But in a place like that, even the walls listened. Down the hall, a phone started ringing. 3 beats, 4. The intercom buzzed, static first, then a long pause, then connected. You can bleed in a hospital and still be invisible, but paperwork, that's the language they never ignored. They didn't call my name in that hallway, so I wrote it in legal ink, back home. My shoes left faint streaks across the hardwood grime, from a place that had tried to pretend I didn't exist. I didn't undress. I didn't rest. I went straight to the drawer, the one I never touched unless something was already broken. Inside, beneath my mother's will, was a blank draft we'd meant to finish together. That conversation never happened. Stroke, silence, still, her signature at the bottom whispered, "You know what to do." I clicked on the desk lamp. Its glow spilled over the paper like warm confession. Then, I picked up the pen, steadied my hand, and wrote 2 words across the amendment clause. Urgent care. Not emotional, not poetic, just weaponized clarity. If they needed permission to care for her, they'd have to go through me now. I glanced at the clock. 9:02 p.m. I'd told myself I wouldn't bother Priya after hours, but the silence in my chest had turned into something else. A pressure, a pulse. I hit call. 3 rings, then her voice, priyasingh.com, clipped. My favorite kind of lawyer. I need to petition for care rights, I said. She didn't ask why. She just replied, request her records before Monday. They won't make it easy if we wait. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and opened my laptop. The screen's blue light hit my face like a warning. I typed into the subject line, request for immediate records release. For a moment, my fingers hovered. Flash. My mother, post-stroke, barely able to swallow. She'd gripped my hand and rasped, "Don't let them strip me down. I'm still here." Even now, I could feel the trembling of her hand in mine. I typed, records needed for court, clicked send. The whoosh of the email felt heavier than it should have. Then, I sat back, silence, not the lonely kind from the ER. This one was earned. I stared at the screen until it dimmed itself. In my reflection, I didn't look like someone asking for access, I looked like someone taking it. The paper sat on my desk, the words still wet. Urgent care. I underlined them once, twice, then closed the file. I knew what would come next. Pushback, delay, maybe even manipulation. But now, the burden was documented. They couldn't say they didn't know. I stood. My legs ached. My head throbbed. But I had sent it. That was enough for tonight. I turned off the lamp. The room fell into a soft hush. But inside, something loud had shifted. They'll send them, I whispered, and this time, I meant it. They only call a meeting in a glass room when they want transparency. They only close the door when they're afraid of what you'll say. That morning, I sat beneath the fluorescent lights of Priya's law firm and watched the system prepared to flinch. The chairs were too modern, the kind that made you sit straight and feel watched. Sunlight slashed through the glass walls, illuminating the legal pad in front of me like it was a confession booth. Priya was already there. Glasses low on her nose, rifling through a copy of my mother's will. Her pen tapped the table. 3 steady beats. Then, she looked up. You hold executor powers, she said, but not duty of care. My mouth went dry. So they could listen to me about her assets, but not about her body, her rights, her care. I folded my hands in my lap. They were colder than I expected. What now? I asked. We petition, she replied. Request a caregiver mandate. The court needs a reason to hand you the keys they should have given already. My fingers tightened. Permission to care. As if love wasn't reason enough. I looked down at the pen beside the summons draft. Another weapon in ink. I signed the show cause order. It didn't shake. Neither did I. Outside the conference room, someone spilled coffee. The sound made both of us look up. A bitter smell followed the scent of someone else's chaos bleeding through the glass. Still, I kept writing. Add a request for medical chart delivery, I said. Tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight. Priya's brow lifted slightly, not in surprise, just approval. This will provoke them, she warned. Let them respond. I wasn't bluffing, I was building. There was a moment of stillness as Priya passed the papers back to me. In that silence, I saw my mother again. Not in a bed, not in a hospital gown, but at our kitchen table, lipstick smudged on her coffee mug, reading the paper out loud, sharp, proud, unshakable. I blinked once and swallowed. She wasn't there, but she wasn't gone either. The conference room was cold, but my palms were warm now, heat from movement, from meaning. I stood and gathered the files. The door creaked when I opened it. The tiny sound broke the stillness, like glass cracking under pressure. Priya stayed behind. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd brought the fight this far. It was moving now. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A number I didn't know. I answered, with one word, yes. A courier's voice. Records for Ms. Rhodes. Section 4. Wardroom witness. Word count. 698 mini CTA at top. If this story found you at midnight, let me know. I'm listening. Don't scroll past. Someone else needs to hear this too. Hook. Revenge doesn't always wear heels and lipstick. Sometimes it wears latex gloves and a badge clipped to a scrub top. Sometimes it wheels your mother down a hall and forgets her on purpose. The folder was thick clinical beige and shaking slightly in my hands, not from the weight, from what I knew I'd find inside. The first page was standard, vitals, allergies, list of prescriptions. The second, 2 undocumented falls. No reports filed. Just hand-scribbled notes in the margins like afterthoughts. Like my mother's body was a post-it. My eyes scanned faster, heart rate elevated. Not hers, mine. Page 5. Nurse alerted to patient call, no response recorded. Another line, attempted for shift. Bruising noted, no follow-up. I stopped breathing, because that's what this page smelled like. Neglect dressed as protocol. My hand reached into my purse, the one I'd carried through law firms, court clerks, and now this ward like a second spine. I pulled out my phone. Click, click, click. Each flash was a timestamp, each photo a pulse, each page a scream they hoped would stay quiet. I texted Priya.me, we have negligence, add to petition. For attachments, she didn't reply immediately, but the 3 dots started bouncing within seconds. That was enough. I closed the folder and inhaled. Shallow, sharp, still to clean. Too lemon-scented to be honest. The ward was quiet now. Not peaceful, just paused. Like it knew it was being watched. Or worse, witnessed. I zipped my purse and stood. The chart stayed in my hands. If they wanted it back, they'd have to file a formal request. Across the room, a presence shifted. I turned. A woman in navy scrubs, mid-40s, confident, cold eyes, charge nurse. She didn't speak for a long second. Then, almost conversationally, "Don't leave evidence behind." It wasn't a warning. It was a threat dressed like advice. I didn't flinch. I tucked the file into my bag, right next to the lipstick my mother never wore again. Behind me, the hallway hummed. Machines clicked. But inside me, it was silent. Still, like standing at the edge of something massive. I stepped into the elevator. Doors slid shut with surgical precision, and there, in the mirrored panel, I didn't see a daughter. I saw a plaintiff, with purpose in her shoulders, and war in her eyes. As I rode down, I whispered to my reflection, soft but sure, "We go to court on Thursday." They handed me the discharge folder like it meant freedom, but no paperwork ever freed a daughter from duty, especially not the kind dressed in soft socks and failing memory. I wheeled my mother through the hospital doors, past a receptionist who never made eye contact. Her eyes fluttered half-closed, in the chair, head tilting slightly like it always did when she was too proud to sleep. The same woman who used to scold me for slouching in church now sagged in silence. At home, the hallway swallowed us whole, not because it was narrow, but because it remembered things I hadn't made peace with, like the mark on the baseboard from the Christmas she trip, or the crooked photo of her and Dad forever, mid-laugh forever before the stroke. The wheels squeaked on the hardwood. Each sound made the house feel too awake, like it hadn't been expecting her to come back. In the kitchen, Mark hovered near the coffee maker like he owned the air around it. Grace stood near the door, holding her purse too tightly for a sit. "Emma," she smiled, lips pinched. "How long do you think she'll stay with you? Not, can we help? Not, are you okay?" Just the timeline of inconvenience. I looked over at the sofa, mother, already there, blinking at the ceiling like it might answer for her. "Until she's safe," I said. And if my voice cut to clean, let it. I laid out the pillbox on the coffee table, the new one, color-coded, easy to follow. Every tablet earned, every hour mapped. Next to it, a printed care schedule taped to the fridge, one column for meds, one for meals, one for visits. Then I went to the study, locked the door, unzipped the file folder, and pulled out the amended will. It still smelled like the manila cabinet in Priya's office, legal dust and lemon toner. I read the clause I'd written out loud. "All heirs named herein are bound by duty of care, physical or financial, until medical independence is restored." I didn't write it as a threat, I wrote it as truth with a timestamp. No one would watch her rot for inheritance ever again. I taped the schedule's duplicate beside the clause, and slid both into the same drawer that once held wedding photos and home insurance. Family and fire. I heard Grace laugh, too light, too fake, from the kitchen. She never used to laugh like that around Mom. But then again, Mom never used to forget who Grace was. I turned the key in the drawer lock. The sound wasn't loud, but it felt final. Later, that night, I stood outside the study again, listened, stillness. I turned the knob once, it didn't budge. I smiled, not because it was locked, but because it was mine. I didn't care who peeked in the fridge or eyed the will. No unauthorized visitor would touch what I sealed. Not anymore. We weren't just keeping her home. We were keeping her protected. And if anyone asked how long she'd stay, I'd show them the drawer, the pillbox, the clause, and the lock. Click. "We'll see who respects that," I whispered. And this time, the house listened back. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They left paper cuts instead to envelopes, stacked on the stair landing like offerings from cowards. Sunlight hit them just enough to make the cursive names gleam. Grace's loops too perfect, marks a threat in ink. Even silence has a sender. I didn't open them right away. I just stared. Let the morning hang there, brittle, still, no coffee brewing, no birds outside, just two folded declarations waiting for war. I picked the top one. Mark. He always struck first, even when pretending to help. The letter wasn't long, just long enough to say, "You're unfit," without saying it. He wanted control, legal guardianship, financial access, clarity over our mother's needs. The second envelope smelled faintly of Grace's perfume, like she'd sprayed it before sealing her venom. Inside, a single line, handwritten, in violet ink. "You overstepped. This isn't your decision. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just folded the paper again, neatly like I was handling dirty linen no one wanted to wash. The fireplace hadn't been lit in weeks, but today felt cold, inside and out. I struck a match and fed it to their words. Mark's burned fast. Typical. All fire, no substance. Grace's curled slower, like it knew it deserved to suffer. I watched the flames pull their intentions apart, line by line, loop by loop, until nothing remained but ash and the bitter smell of smoke and Chanel. Then, I did something I hadn't done since the funeral. I knelt, and I sifted. My fingers touched the blackened edge of Grace's pajonli. The words you and decision had survived. Evidence, intent, pattern, dot. I placed the charred scraps in a plastic sandwich bag and zipped it shut. Then I reached for my phone, hand steady now. Me. They've moved. Photos attached. Priya's reply came like thunder on a dry day. Priya, we'll be ready. I didn't move right away. The hearth was still glowing, orange embers like slow, pulsing hearts. Everything they'd said tried to wound me, but I knew something now. The only thing more dangerous than a woman backed into a corner is a woman who's been here before and built a door. I stood slowly, tossed the lighter into the drawer with the amended will, watched it land beside the claws like a weapon set to rest. Then, I looked at the fire again, saw myself reflected in the glass. Ash streaked across my cheek like war paint. Let them come, I said softly. And the house didn't just listen this time, it watched. They wanted me to hand her over, so I did, just not to them. The courthouse smelled like bleach and brass, the kind of clean that hides messes, not truth. Priya slid the papers across the table without looking up. Sign here, she said softly. And here. Her voice had that surgical calm I'd grown to trust, the same one I used to fake through grief. Only now, it was armored. Clara Diaz was already in the room. She didn't look like a guardian, no clipboard, no stern jacket, just a woman in dark jeans and soft curls, the kind that didn't need to prove she belonged in a courtroom. The judge read the petition without flinching. Temporary protective guardianship, Priya repeated. For the sake of neutrality. I watched Mark's lawyer shift uncomfortably in his chair. Grace hadn't even bothered to show. That was fine. Sometimes power enters the room wearing empathy like a badge. The next day, Clara came to the house. She brought cookies. Who does that? She stepped inside like she wasn't afraid of echoes, sat beside my mother and touched her hand gently. Introduced herself twice. Didn't mind when Mom forgot her 5 seconds later. I watched them from the kitchen, letting the scene write its own calm, until the front door slammed. Grace, double quotes, Emma. Heels clacked across the floor like accusations. She spotted Clara and froze. You can't just pawn off, Mom, she hissed. Clara didn't flinch. She stood up slowly, calm, steady. I'm here for her safety, she said, not your comfort. Silence cracked the air like a dropped vase. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum louder. I didn't speak yet. I let Clara take the blow. She didn't just absorb it, she reversed it. I serve her needs, she said, not your whims. That's when I stepped forward, placed the signed affidavit on the dining table. Mark's name was on the objections section, but the ink had dried cold. Grace's face tightened. You think this fixes it? I didn't answer. I just opened the drawer beside me, the one that held the amended will, held up the Ziploc bag of ashes. She knew exactly what they were. Grace stormed out. Mark arrived as she left. They brushed shoulders in the doorway but didn't look at each other. A silent betrayal passed between them, too subtle for anyone but siblings to recognize. He didn't speak at first, just hovered in the threshold. His jaw clenched like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. I didn't expect Clara to be so, he muttered. Professional, I offered. Didn't respond. Clara stepped forward. She'll be reassessed weekly. We follow the care plan. No one touches finances without my clearance. That's when he knew he'd lost. He looked at my mother on the couch. She smiled at him like he was a nice mailman, then turned back to the TV. He didn't walk in, he walked out. Later, Clara and I sat in the quiet. The smell of cinnamon cookies hung in the air, trying to soften everything. She said, You know this won't be easy. I know, I whispered. But it's fair. We didn't talk after that. Not for a while, just sat with the sound of the fireplace kindling again, slowly, like it remembered its purpose. I glanced at the purse on the side table. the same one Mom used to guard like a lifeline. Now it just sat there, soft, open, empty, like it didn't need to defend itself anymore. Clara stood. We'll start fresh next week. Medical review, emotional check-ins. I nodded. Thank you. She paused at the door, then added, this is for her good. I didn't just believe her. I believed in her. When the door shut behind her, I didn't feel afraid. I felt prepared. Turned to the affidavit again. My name at the bottom, bold, unshaken. We have our chance, I whispered. And this time, I knew the house wasn't watching. It was guarding. They called it a care center. But it smelled like bleach and goodbye. The receptionist smiled too wide. The hallway echoed with wheelchairs and loneliness. And I knew before the tours even started that I didn't belong here. Not with her. The administrator wore a navy suit and a cold watch. She walked me through the facility like a realtor selling guilt. This wing is memory care, she chirped. Each resident gets their own personalized shadow box. I nodded, but my fingers curled inside my coat sleeve. A lock of hair had more soul than this place. We passed a man screaming at the wall. A nurse hushed him with a voice to practice to be kind. Down the hall, someone coughed and didn't stop. The lights buzzed overhead like they hated silence. In the conference room, she offered coffee and styrofoam. I declined. She slid the rate sheet across the table like it was a menu of what I couldn't afford. Grace's name was scribbled on the financial sponsorship line. In pencil. I stared at the paper. $7,100 per month. Not including medications or dignity. The administrator was still speaking, something about payment schedules and visitation hours, but my ears rang. Like grief was suddenly loud again. How will I pay for this? I whispered. And it wasn't a question for her. It was for the universe, and for the man who wasn't here to answer it. I blinked and saw his handwriting, not the administrator's, not Priya's. His dot he used to fold receipts into perfect squares said clean corners meant a clean conscience. The pension drawer stood abruptly. Didn't apologize, didn't explain. I just left. The sky outside was gray in all directions. I texted Priya while walking. Need funds. Urgently. She replied within minutes. Check the pension paperwork. I got home before the guilt could catch up. The old drawer was in the guest room closet, top shelf, behind boxes labeled Christmas and Dad's tools. I pulled it down with both hands. It thudded against the bed. Dust puffed like old secrets. Inside, birth certificates, warranty slips, a faded photo of us in 1994, and under it, an envelope marked annuity. Lockwood, life. My throat closed. He'd named me the contingent beneficiary. My fingers trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of unexpected mercy. There was a quiet moment then. No beeping, no buzzing, no administrator chirping. Costs, just me, the envelope, and the sound of hope opening slowly. I held it to my chest, felt the edges press against my heartbeat. This wasn't just money. It was a message from the man who'd loved me quietly, even in death. Later that night, I sat with Mom again. She stared at the muted television. I stared at her hands. Still, small, familiar. Mom, I whispered, we're not putting you in a place that smells like endings. She blinked, didn't respond. But she leaned slightly toward me. That was enough. I looked across the room at the purse. Her old one, resting in its usual place. Like a witness, I turned back to the annuity letter, ran my fingers across the ink. Like Braille. I'll find the rest, I whispered. And this time, it wasn't a promise, it was a vow. The lamp beside us flickered gently, not failing, just adjusting to the dark. And I adjusted with it. They said benefits expire, but love DOESN, single quotes, T. And somewhere between the receptionist's sigh and the buzz of fluorescent guilt, I remembered why I was here. The pension office smelled like dust and decisions. Not bad. Not good, just tired. Like every folder here carried someone's unfinished goodbye. They say courtrooms are where truth lives. They forget it has to survive first. The air wasn't heavy that morning. It was surgical, cutting through every hope I dared to carry. And I carried them anyway. We walked into the courthouse like we weren't outnumbered. Clara beside me, stack of documents, shoulders squared. Me, I had the will, the annuity confirmation, and a spine made of yesterday's silence. Grace and Mark were already there. Gallery seats, first row. Their eyes followed us like debt collectors, but I didn't flinch. The judge entered. Not young, not cruel, just practiced. I exhaled once, steadied my voice. I fight for her voice, I said, and I won't let it be silenced by convenience or control. Grace's attorney rose sharp-suited smug. Your Honor, we have deep concerns over financial irregularities. Large sums recently surfaced from annuity sources that were previously dormant. He smirked like it was a trap. I stood, calm, held out the stamped papers, confirmed by Lockwood Pension, reverted not stolen, allocated legally, received transparently. I didn't need to argue. I just needed to show up with the truth. Mark shifted in his seat. Tension cracked in his jaw like a dry twig. Then Clara took the stand. No theatrics, just facts. I reviewed the prior caregiver's logs, she said. They skipped meds, ignored appointments, logged check-ins that never happened. She paused. Let it hurt. That's not oversight. That's abandonment. The courtroom stayed still. Even the clock stopped clicking. Or maybe it just held its breath, like we all did. Then came the amendment. I placed it gently on the bench. This clause, I said, softly, was added when my mother could still sign her name without trembling. It says, duty of care is more than visits and checkbooks. It's remembering her stories when she forgets them. The judge picked up the will. Read, reread, didn't blink. Beside me, Clara squeezed my hand once. Quick. I didn't squeeze back. I couldn't move yet. Grace leaned forward, mouth open, but this time, no words came. Just panic behind Polish. Then, the judge looked up. Any final arguments? That silence, it wasn't defeat, it was power, returned to its rightful hands. The will sat beside the old purse now, no longer a document of war, but a record of endurance. Mom slept through most of it, but I think she knew. Her fingers curled slightly around the purse strap, like she'd chosen sides in her sleep. I looked down at my own hands, still shaking, but not from fear. The courtroom door closed behind us, not loud, just final, and in that click, they didn't say anything when the judge ruled, but their silence broke louder than a gavel. Grace blinked, like she hadn't prepared for the word granted. Mark looked down like the floor had betrayed him, and me. I didn't move. Healing doesn't announce itself. It slips in quiet as breath, loud as memory. That morning, the sunroom smelled like lemon oil and possibility. Clara rolled the yoga mat open with the kind of care you'd use folding a flag. Mom blinked slowly in the chair. Her fingers twitched once around the purse strap. A signal, a start. I watched as Clara knelt beside her, voice low, words deliberate. Just the arms today. Breathe in, reach, breathe out, let go, let go, that go. The phrase clung to the glass like condensation. I stayed by the doorway, holding my coffee like armor. It wasn't fear that made me linger, it was reverence for the tiny rebellions happening in that chair. A shoulder lift, a knee flex, a breath taken without permission. Progress doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through veins that had forgotten their rhythm. Later, Mom tried to stand. Her knuckles whitened on the walker. Clara steadied her, and then one foot moved. Not gracefully, not confidently, but deliberately. And then the other. My hand flew to my mouth. The sound that escaped me was part laugh, part prayer. Behind me, the blender HUMMED. Grace, in my kitchen, making a smoothie. She brought it in on a tray like peace offering dressed in berries. Thought she'd like something fresh, she said. I nodded. Didn, single quotes T speak, couldn't yet. Mark was in the kitchen, rinsing plates. The same man who once said, she won't know the difference. Now he was washing every dish, like it was an apology. Upstairs, I opened my journal. Not the one I wrote bitterness in. The one I saved for Grace. Honest. They rose to the challenge, I wrote. And this house? It holds less resentment now. I stared at the ink bleeding into the page. A flash. Our backyard, 1993. Dad at the grill. Mom in a wide-brimmed hat. Me, Grace, Mark laughing, like the world was a trampoline. We didn't know then that grief would one day sit at our table, or that healing might, too. Downstairs, laughter cracked the silence. Not just a chuckle, a full, round laugh. Mom. It burst out of her like sunlight, sneaking through closed blinds. Clara joined in. They laughed in the living room, and I stared at the keys in my palm, two dull, silver ones, cold as doubt. Forgiveness doesn't feel like a firework. It feels like metal, heavy, unassuming, and terrifying in the right hands. I exhaled slowly. The hallway smelled like citrus and fresh bread. We had people coming. A welcome back gathering. Just neighbors, Clara, nothing fancy. But everything was different. Grace had helped me with the tea tray. Mark brought folding chairs from the garage, and neither of them had argued. Just months ago, they would have fought me over curtain colors. Now they were asking where the sugar bowls lived. The test wasn't if they'd say sorry, it was if they'd stay. I placed the keys in a small velvet pouch, the kind Dad used to keep poker chips in. The irony made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. The front door opened. Clara walked in, sun in her hair, bottle of wine in hand. She kissed my cheek. "You okay?" she asked, quiet. I nodded, which wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole story. A knock, then another. Then warmth. Neighbors came with pie, casserole, stories. Laughter bounced down the staircase and softened the floorboards. Even Mom seemed brighter, her eyes tracking the sunlight like it was an old friend. Clara raised her glass. "2 second chances," she said. Everyone clinked, even Grace. Afterward, I found her near the mantel, hands folded, posture too perfect. "I was wrong," she said. No preamble, about everything. I waited. She stepped closer. "I didn't trust you because I couldn't imagine loving her the way you did." I didn't reply. Some apologies don't need applause. Just room. Mark passed, biplate in hand, smile small but real. His arm brushed mine gently. "I'm still learning," he murmured, "but I'm here." Pawa returned one click at a time. I reached into my pocket, held out the velvet pouch. Mark opened it first. He stared at the keys like they might burn, then nodded, like he understood what they cost me to give. Grace took hers slower. Her fingers trembled when metal met palm, then steadied. "Keys?" she asked. "Really? Trust?" I said. "Really." The room quieted. Not awkwardly, peacefully. The kind of hush that means something has shifted. That the damage isn't gone but the door is open. Clara poured more tea. Mom looked up from her seat, then at the fireplace. Then Grace, then Mark, and me. I cried without sobbing, just tears thin, clean, forgiving. I went downstairs. The living room looked different. Same furniture, same lamp, but the space between people, smaller now. I picked up the purse from the armrest, brought it to Mum. She took it like ritual, unzipped it slowly. Inside, a mirror, a rosary, an old lipstick, and a photo of all of us. She looked up at my eyes, fogged, but shining. "Beautiful," she said. We all froze. It was the first word she'd said in days. I turned the photo over. Dad's handwriting. A single line. "Keep this when things get hard." I folded it carefully, placed it back inside. Because justice doesn't shout. It arrives quietly through doors you were once shoved through. The judge's voice was steady. "Guardianship awarded to Ms. Emma Quinn. Reimbursement of care costs will be honored through annuity documentation." He paused. "A precedent in care, not punishment." I nodded, once. Didn't thank him. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because some victories deserve reverence, not applause. Clara gathered our papers like medals. Mark stayed seated. Grace didn't blink for 9 full seconds. I turned toward them. Not with gloat. With gravity. "We're still siblings," I said, "but I'm not asking for help anymore. Only respect." Grace's lips parted, then pressed shut, like she was swallowing glass. She leaned in, whispered barely, "I'm sorry." Mark stood slowly, his suit wrinkled, his pride more so. He didn't reach for my hand, just nodded once. "We'll support her, from now on." Support, not control, not decide. Support. I stepped past them. Not away, just forward. "Coffee?" I asked. My voice softer than it had been in weeks. They hesitated, but followed. Down the marble hallway, out of the courtroom, into morning light that didn't feel like an interrogation. Back at the house, the air had changed. No tension, no fear, just space, raw, unfinished, honest. Mom sat by the window, the old purse still on her lap, her fingers resting gently on the zipper, like it meant something again. I made coffee. Mark sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. Grace stood by the fireplace, arms folded. Clara watched them without speaking. She knew this was their courtroom now. I poured the cups, hands steady. "Terms remain the same," I said. "Clarity over kindness." They nodded, and for the first time in months we all sat, not as enemies, as witnesses. To grief, to guilt, to growth. Later, I walked upstairs, alone. I sat on the bed and opened the nightstand, pulled out the letter again, the one from the pension office. His name beside mine, still there, still strong. I pressed it against my heart, not for comfort, for closure. The purse downstairs, the will in the drawer, the coffee still warm. These weren't weapons anymore. They were proof that love doesn't need permission. It just needs endurance. The judge hadn't granted mercy, he delivered justice. And justice, when it's late, enters like a guest but stays like a guardian. The sun shifted through the blinds, casting soft light across the floor. Not golden, but enough. I whispered to no one. We start again, and zipped the purse. This wasn't a symbol of battle anymore. It was a vessel, for memory, for meaning, for us. That night, we ate together. No one led the conversation, no one needed to. It flowed, like old songs you remember, even after forgetting the lyrics. I leaned back in my chair and looked at all of them, fractured, flawed, and here we were, never perfect, but now, we were present, and in presence, I think, there's power. Later, I stood by the window with my journal in hand. I flipped to the last page, wrote 2 words, we're whole. The lamp behind me flickered once, then steadied. A breeze pushed the curtain gently, like the house was exhaling, too, and I whispered into the hush, we're whole again. She smiled. It wasn't for anyone in particular, but it was enough. We stayed like that. No agenda, no rehearsal. Just bodies in the same room, breathing the same air, without fear. Later, as dusk smudged the windows, I walked to the front door. It was still cracked open. I stepped out. Sunlight soaked the porch in soft gold, not flashy, just generous. Behind me, I heard Grace laugh at something Clara said. Mark called out for napkins. Mom's purse zipped shut once, deliberate. I turned back toward the house, held the doorknob for a second, and then closed it gently, not to shut anyone out, but to say, you're safe now. The last thing I saw was the photo on the entry, Taepo Useong, unbroken, unaware, and beside it, the keys, now warm from hands that had finally learned how to hold them. If this found you at midnight, let me know. I'm listening. I used to cry in hospital parking lots. Now I'm dedicating one. Funny, isn't it, how the same building that broke you can become the one you rebuild from? The ribbon was blue, not my choice, Mom's favorite. It shimmered under the August sun like a river of memory. That we were standing outside the ER ward, a plaque covered in velvet. My fingers hovered just above it, steady, then not. The unveiling of metal, of meaning, of mistakes. A month had passed since the courtroom. Long enough for people to forget headlines, short enough for healing too. Still ache. Clara stood beside me, clipboard in hand, presence like breath. Grace wore flats in hope. Mark held Mom's wheelchair steady, like it mattered. It did. I cleared my throat. Not for a speech, for a promise. We built this in her name, I said, because proper care isn't charity. It's a right. The mayor clapped. The cameras flashed. But none of it reached me like her hand did Mom's when she squeezed mine, soft and certain. The plaque, the silence, the past. REFRAMED. When I pulled the velvet cloth away, I didn't cry. I expected to, had rehearsed it, even, but instead, the silence hit me like truth. It read, the Evelyn Quinn Fund for Compassionate Care, in honor of dignity that cannot be forgotten. The hospital lights flickered behind us just once. A nurse paused to read it. That pause was worth every sleepless night. Clara touched my shoulder. Mark whispered, she'd be proud. Grace leaned in, she is. I couldn't speak, not yet. I just stood there, listening to the quiet, because grief doesn't always wail. Sometimes it bows. The twist wasn't revenge, it was return. We walked inside. The waiting room had changed. Not the furniture, but the feeling. A volunteer desk, a lending library, a wall of photos, families, survivors, caregivers. And in the middle, a framed copy of Mom's will, the amendment, the one they fought me over. It wasn't framed as victory, it was framed as legacy. I looked at Grace, who was talking to a nurse about staffing needs, at Mark, already drafting a maintenance budget with Clara. These were the same people who once called me dramatic. Now, they were building dreams from the very thing they once denied. Mom's purse sat on her lap, unzipped, open, inside. Tissues, lip balm, the photo, still folded, still sacred. I smiled, because I knew what came next. Later, the local station aired a segment. Emma Quinn, they said, started the Evelyn Fund after caring for her mother alone. They called me resilient, called me a quiet force, called me a guardian, but none of them saw the real power shift. Not on the plaque, not in the funds, but in the way I looked at the camera, like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. We stood together at the hospital doors, all four of us. No scripts, no fear. I pressed the automatic door button, watched them open like lungs. Mom wheeled herself through. No assistance, just intention. Behind her, the plaque caught a sliver of light, not golden, but enough. I whispered to no one. I wasn't a guest in my life, I was its guardian. They used to skip our names, like we were a typo in the system. Now, they say them like prayer, loud, clear, certain. Mrs. Rhodes, the nurse's voice cut through the sterile air like a string snapping. The hallway remembered us this time. I turned, same beige walls, same linoleum floor. But this time, we weren't invisible. The ER hallway hadn't changed, but I had. The last time we were here, no one looked up. Now the nurse smiled. The receptionist nodded. Even the janitor paused, like he remembered the scent of our grief. Mom sat upright in the waiting chair, purse in lap, shoes polished. Her lips curled into a knowing smile. They know me now, she whispered. I knelt, pressed her palm between mine, like a psalm. I told them not to skip us again. Her purse handle creaked slightly as she adjusted it, the sound of reclaimed space, names, memory, and the weight of being seen. They led us to a room. Not urgent, not forgotten, expected. A vase of yellow flowers sat near the monitor. Fake, but kind. I helped Mom sit back. She didn't need much help. I glanced around. No gurneys this time. No silence that felt like punishment. Just quiet. Just ... readiness. A photo fell out of her purse when she unzipped it. I picked it up, the same one from before, edges worn, but the image's whole was still sharp. I held it for a moment, then tucked it back in, like a spell. A nurse knocked once, then waited. Respect doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it pauses. She entered with soft hands and steady eyes. Emma, she said to me, like my name belonged here. A name called is a life acknowledged after the checkup. We didn't rush. Mom looked around the hallway like she was memorizing it, not out of fear but fondness. At the end of the corridor, the dedication plaque gleamed, still mounted, still bold, a flash. Clara raising a glass. Mark and Grace at lunch, passing bread without blame. Not family by force, but by forgiveness. I helped Mom into her coat. As I fastened the button, she looked at me and said, "It's not the same hospital anymore." I smiled. "It's not the same story." She nodded, then whispered, "Say it again." I took her hand. "Our story is ours to tell." We walked toward the exit. The automatic doors parted with a soft whoosh. Behind us, a nurse called another name. A different family turned. But this time, we weren't the ones overlooked. This time, we had been spoken into the room. I turned back, one last glance down the hallway. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied. And for a brief moment, we stood still, not stuck, just still, like punctuation, before the next chapter.